Could see the way well enough with a lantern hanging from the carriage's canopy, and he'd travelled this route often enough. A gust of wind blew a wet spray into his face. What was the point of the blasted canopy if he was going to end up soaked anyway? He called over the noise of the storm to his horse, flicking the crop to speed the animal along. Ahead, he spotted a glow that seemed too low to be a street lamp. The light moved. Just as he squinted to look closer, another bolt of lightning lit the sky, revealing a carriage on the adjoining path. In the momentary glimpse, he'd seen that the carriage leaned at an odd angle, perhaps as a result of a broken wheel or axle. Two people stood next to the carriage, a man holding a lantern, and a woman with an umbrella. As a gentleman, he could not continue without volunteering assistance, although he did reach beneath the bench and take hold of a pistol. Stories of bandits waylaying lone travellers were all too common, and though the scene looked innocent, he wouldn't risk being taken by surprise. A boom of thunder crashed overhead. The passengers still had not seen him approach. "Hello there," he called as he rode near. The woman whirled, her eyes wide, and she took a step back. Her gaze darted from her companion to Jonathan. The man, who was dressed in the livery of a servant, stepped in front of her, his hand on a pistol in his waistband. Jonathan laid his own weapon on the curricle bench and held up his hands, yelling to be heard over the storm. "Do not fear. I saw that your carriage is out of commission." "Stuck in the mud." The driver jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "My lord," he added, looking closer. Rain plastered his stringy hair to his head and dripped from his face. "I see." Jonathan lifted his own lantern from its hook and stepped out of the carriage, grimacing as his boots sank into the sticky muck. He held up his arm to block the rain pelting his face. "Then perhaps I might be of assistance." The woman took a step from behind the servant, and Jonathan raised the lantern to get a better look. In the glow of the firelight, he could see her cape was well designed, but not the latest in fashion, and the carriage, while not a hired hackney, had seen a fair bit of use. She was not a noblewoman, then, but certainly a gentleman's daughter. Where is her travelling companion? The wind tugged at the umbrella, pulling it away and stretching her arm nearly straight. She gasped as a blast of wet air hit her face. Jonathan moved quickly, grasping the handle that had nearly been tugged from her grip, and held it over her head. He stood with her beneath the umbrella, so close that she tipped back her head to look up at him. "Forgive me for presuming my introduction, miss." He spoke with his chin nearly touching his chest to look down at the woman. "I think in such circumstances a breach of etiquette can be forgiven." Her lips lifted in a smile. Even in the dim lantern light, he could see her eyes were a mossy green colour. They were large, nearly too large for her face, but the effect was breathtaking, and he held her gaze, perhaps a bit too long, especially for their close quarters. "Miss Maryann Croft." Her voice broke the spell of her gaze. "Enchanted," he murmured, and remembering himself, cleared his throat. "Jonathan Burles, Lord Rensfield." He meant to tip his head in a bow, but his neck was already bent as far forward as his collar would allow. "A pleasure, my lord." She dipped in a curtsy that, from his view, appeared as though the top of her bonnet sank down into the darkness and then returned. Another howl of wind blasted a shower of rain over them. Miss Croft covered her face, and Jonathan was once again aware of the storm, the mud, and the waiting servant. He raised the lantern and returned the umbrella to Miss Croft, grimacing at the shower of rain when he stepped from beneath it. "Shall we have a look at the carriage?" The servant had apparently been waiting for this very question, and hurried to pull the horses forward. As the animals strained, Jonathan watched the wheels, which didn't budge in the least. He moved to the rear of the conveyance to push. Though the animals pulled, and Jonathan shoved, the carriage just slipped and sank farther, as did the Earl. Finally, he called for the servant to halt. He motioned the man toward him. "There's no help for this tonight," he yelled over the howling wind, lifting his feet from the thick mud. "Come, miss, I will deliver you home." Miss Croft's brow furrowed, and she looked at him, then to the driver. Jonathan wondered what she could possibly be thinking. Was she considering walking? Did riding with a stranger make her nervous? Another burst of lightning followed directly by a crash of thunder.